Hello, dear students. Welcome back to your English class online. I hope you all are keeping good health and are very safe. Students, we shall continue with our next phase, that is semester. Today, we shall take the chapter number 4, A New Name, written by Linda Sue Park. Students, do you remember? We have already covered part A and B in our earlier sessions. Today, we shall take part C. So, are you all ready? Let's get started. Before we begin, let's do a quick recap of what we have covered in part A and B. So, the story is of a 10-year-old girl from Korea. Her name is Kim Sun-hee and a brother Kim Hae-yul. Now, this particular story tells about how the Koreans are being taken over by the Japanese and many restrictions are being imposed, and then a new law is passed, that is all the Koreans are supposed to take a new Japanese names. So there is a lot of chaos among the people. Now Kim has to take a new name, and so a father selects a name that is Kyoko, Kaneyama Kyoko, which means brightness. He selects his name so that it matches with her earlier name, that is Kim Sun-hee, because that too meant brightness. So her new Japanese name is now Kaneyama Kyoko, but she finds it very difficult to accept it as a new name. In the classroom, there's a lot of confusion and chaos because the students have to remember the Japanese names of the other students. Kim is very careful in memorizing and also calling out the Japanese name of other children. She's very careful initially, but finally she gets fed up and of being careful every minute, and she makes a big blunder. Now, what is this blunder? That is, once they appoint a officer to take the rounds of the classroom to see that all the children are following the Japanese rules and also are calling out each other with their Japanese names. Now, it so happens that Kim calls her friend by her old Korean name, that is Myungin. And this particular event happens while the officer is in the class. So that particular officer then prompts the teacher to punish her. So the teacher calls her in the front and then she beats her with a stick. Though this teacher does not want to beat her, Kaneyama is very upset, not because of the beating, but especially because she feels it is very unfair that they have been given new Japanese name, but they haven't been given enough time to memorize those new names. Her mother is also very upset and she applies soothing herbal medicines, but the scar doesn't go with very soon. But Kim is very happy because the moment she sees those scars, she feels all the more angry. And besides her, there is one more friend of hers who is also angry because she had to change her name to a Japanese name. So this is what we have covered in part A and B. Now let us see what happens next in part C. Children, I want you to read along with me. His name was Tomo and he was Japanese. When we played together after school during those early days of the name change, he had to check himself all the time. Kyoko, he kept saying. Now this other friend who also was angry just like her, his name was Tom and he was a Japanese. Though he was a Japanese, but he felt very sad that the Koreans had to change their Japanese name. So he was a very good friend of Kim, and they often played together after school. So, but he had to be very careful to call her by the Japanese name. So sometimes he would make mistake. So sometimes he would call her Sunhee, and then he would correct himself as Kyoko. Once, after correcting himself for what seemed like the 100th time, he stomped his foot in frustration. So what happens, once he made this mistake couple of times, he called her by the Korean name. Okay, and then he gets very irritated and frustrated. Stomped his foot in frustration means getting very angry. Then he, Kyoko, 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 he said, as if trying to pound the name into his brain. So he keeps on repeating her new Japanese name. He says Kyoko, Kyoko, Kyoko. So this is his attempt to memorize, is forcefully trying to memorize the new name. Pound the name into his brain means trying to pound the name into his brain, meaning he's forcefully trying to memorize the name. Kyoko, Kyoko, Ki-ki-ko, Ki-koko. He was getting his tongue all twisted. So it was sounding like a tongue twister. So he was trying very hard to call her by the new Japanese name, but each time he was making blunders, that he was making mistake. I giggled. Kikiko, Kikoko, Kiaku, Kokoka. So now what Kim, she's greatly amused by his blunders. So she laughs, and then she says Kikiko, Kikoko, Kiaku, Kokoka. Now we were both laughing, and now they both end up laughing. Tomo was laughing at the silly sound, so he was finding this all very silly, and he was laughing. I was laughing for the same reason, but I was also secretly pleased to be treating my Japanese name with such disrespect. So they both were laughing. They were highly amused. Especially Tomo was laughing because he found the name like a tongue twister. But Kim was laughing because she was very happy that her new Japanese name was being treated with disrespect, because she hated it. Right? You remember? She didn't want her Korean name to be changed into the Japanese name. She wanted her own Korean name. So she disliked the new Japanese name. And now she was very happy that the Japanese name is being treated with disrespect. Kikiko, Kikoko, Kiaku, Kokoka. Look at that. So these were the tongue twisters. When our laughter faded, Tomo glanced at me quickly and then looked away again. Maybe when it's just the two of us alone, I could still call you Sunhee. What do you think? So finally when they stopped laughing, Tomo glanced at me means looked at me quickly. So he looks at Sunhee and then he asks her, suppose when the two of us are alone, probably that time I can call you by your Korean name, that is Sunhee. So he asked her for her opinion. It wasn't often that Tomo asked for my opinion. So he never asked. It was very less occasions that Tomo used to ask her for opinion. But this time he asked her opinion. He asked, what if I call you by your own original Korean name when just the two of us are alone and nobody can catch us? Now it is Kim's turn to answer. I wanted to answer carefully, so I thought for a moment. So she doesn't hastily answer. She thinks. Okay. So now let's see what are the thoughts going on in her mind. So she thinks, wouldn't that just make it harder? I said, you would have to switch to my Japanese name when we are with other people. You might get confused and forget. So now what she says, but she says that it'll be hard for you because when just the two of us are there, you'll be calling me by the Korean, and then again when the others are there, you'll have to call by the Japanese. So that will create a lot of confusion for you, and it'll be very hard for you to remember. So better you call me by my Japanese name. So here you can see she's not being selfish, though she did not like the Japanese name, but here she cares for her friend Tomo. So she says it's okay, you call me by my Japanese name, even though when we are alone, just the two of us. because she doesn't want him to fall into trouble. I didn't say all that I was thinking, that as a son of the principal, Tomo always had to set an example. Besides, she remembered that Tomo was a son of a principal, so he could not make a mistake. He couldn't set a bad example for others, right? So she was very concerned that Tomo, being a son of a principal, needs to set a right example for the others. A mistake from him would be worse than a mistake from other students. He would lose face. So what she thinks is, if he makes a mistake as a son of a principal, then that would be even worse than if another student had made a mistake. So then he would lose his face. Lose his face means lose his reputation. I didn't have to say it because it was something that Tomo lived with every day. You are right, he said. He flicked another glance at me. Flicked another glance at me means gave me another look. He looked at me again. So he agreed to what she said. Right? He totally agreed. He said, you are right. It's such a nuisance, isn't it? But then he said, it is really a nuisance. So he was very much upset that his friend Kim had to go through all this. He disliked it because he knew that Kim herself did not like it. It's such a nuisance, isn't it? He said. And I knew this was his way of saying he was sorry that I had to change my name. So by doing this, by saying so that it's such a nuisance, he was actually trying to tell Kim that he himself is also not liking this. Though he is a Japanese, he himself is not liking the way she has to change her name to the new Japanese name. And it was his way of telling her sorry for all that was happening. So that shows how innocent these two little kids are, so mature and so concerned for one another. So children, we have concluded this chapter, A New Name. Very beautiful chapter. It talks about a kid's innocence. Let's learn few meanings. Giggled means laughed. Stomped his foot in frustration means to show anger. Pound the name into his brain means trying to forcefully memorize. Glanced at me means looked at me. To lose face is to lose one's reputation. So children, I hope you learn these meanings. Watch this video once again if possible. Watch part A and B also, so that you can get a quick understanding of the story from the beginning. So here we shall now conclude. Read through the text. Learn the meanings. Children, take care of yourself and God bless you all. Thank you so much.